If you've seen Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, written by Aaron Guzikowski, then you know it is a slow-burning, taut fuse of a film that finally explodes in its last 30 seconds. What you're hearing there at the end is the sound of Keller Dover, played by Hugh Jackman, signaling for help by blowing on a plastic red police whistle. He's in a dugout pit under the car in the driveway, trapped there by Holly Jones, played by Melissa Leo, who with her deceased husband was a serial kidnapper and killer of children. Dover's daughter and a neighbor girl had been her latest intended victims. The whistle belongs to the Dover's daughter, in fact. But thanks to the resilience of Dover and the persistence of Detective Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, Jones was thwarted, the daughter freed, and the case all but wrapped up. As the final scene starts, Dover is presumed on the run from criminal charges incurred by kidnapping and torturing Jones's quote-unquote nephew, Alex, played by Paul Dano, who was suspected in the girl's abduction but let go owing to his status as mentally challenged. In reality, though, Dover has been in the pit a day now, which normally wouldn't be so trying, but in his case he has a gunshot wound to the leg that's losing blood by the minute. The way the camera cuts out before the final scene's logical conclusion, the discovery of Dover by Loki, teamed with what the scene accomplishes in terms of summarizing the themes, characters, and narrative of the film makes it, in my opinion at least, no less than perfect storytelling. Here's why. First off, this scene is the perfect culmination of Detective Loki's character, whose key trait, as I mentioned, is his persistence. Not the most stable of cops to begin with, Loki becomes obsessed with finding the missing girls to a point it affects his objectivity, and in turn his career and even his life. The Jones house is presumably the first place he goes upon being released from the hospital after being treated for his own injury. He was shot by Jones upon discovering her with Dover's daughter, and what this tells us is that even now, with the girls safe, the culprit dead, and his own health imperiled, Loki still can't let the case go. For all the answers he's uncovered, it's the lingering questions that preoccupy him still. He just can't settle for a half solution. So he returns to the scene of the crime and lingers there even after the forensics team tells him they came up empty-handed and then pack up for the night. Loki stays, as we expect him to given what we've been shown about him over the course of the film, and he stands staring unfocused into the night as though waiting to intuit the rest of the mystery. And though it is an intuition that rewards him, Loki's persistence pays off. At the same time, this final scene is also the perfect culmination of Dover's character, whose key trait is his resilience, which can be thought of as persistence hardened by trauma or tragedy, something that doesn't just help one endure, it helps them survive. All film, Dover has been challenging every obstacle, eventually taking the law into his own desperate hands when he feels the proper channels have nothing more to offer him. His actions are indisputably illegal, but their morality is up for debate, though not to Dover. To Dover, his actions are necessary evils. They are something he must inflict if his daughter is to survive. The damage this does to Dover mentally and emotionally is obvious, even to him, but this detriment to his own sound mind and body doesn't thwart him. His resilience overrides his rationale, and he continues pushing forward, getting into increasingly more dangerous territory. When he at last makes the correct connections and confronts Jones at her house about his daughter, she gets the upper hand and leaves him bleeding to death in the pit, setting a timer on his peril by wagering he'll last a day at most. When this final scene starts, it's been at least that long since Dover was wounded, and even before the first faint whistle blow is heard, everyone in the audience is wondering the same thing. Will Dover's resilience have been enough to keep him alive? Then we hear it, and long before Loki figures out what it is, let alone what it means, we know Dover has survived. We know his resilience was indeed enough. Thirdly, the scene is also a culmination of the theme of ineptitude that slithers through the film like a snake. Dover feels inept for letting his daughter disappear in the first place and for not being able to find her or force a solution from who he believes to be her abductor. He also thinks that Loki and the entire police force are inept for their inability to hold Alex or get a confession from him, to get a confession from anyone or even a lead. The fact that Dover is eventually proven right in his suspicions that Alex knew something about the girl's disappearance further highlights the ineptitude present in Alex's handling and release. Loki himself feels this ineptitude. It is in fact part of what drives him to obsessiveness, the need to rebel against it, to prove it a falsehood, to prove himself not just capable of his job, but worthy of it as well. Though it isn't his capability that discovers Dover, it's timing and luck, and that fact, teamed with the fact that it happens after the rest of the cops have called it quits after a long day on the property, even further exaggerates the department's ineptitude. Presumably, they've been combing every square inch of the place for clues, except somehow the large piece of plywood under the car in the driveway covering a deep, dark pit. Makes you wonder how fine-toothed their comb was, or if even they knew how to use the thing. Fourthly, there's the whistle, that Chekhov's gun mentioned briefly in the film's first quarter hour, then promptly forgotten about for the next 2 hours until Dover discovers it in the shadows of the pit. The whistle is the final confirmation that he was right, that Jones has undoubtedly kidnapped his daughter. We think that's it. That's the purpose of the whistle, to be proof of Jones's guilt. But when the girl is saved by Loki in the scene after Dover's confinement, we realize this proof is no longer needed, and the whistle becomes something else entirely, an object of hope. In that sense, it fulfills the promise of Chekhov's gun twice over, and with minutes left in the film and the main plot resolved, we're still waiting for one more shot in the dark. Then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, by cutting away before Loki actually discovers Dover, by ending the film before it ends, basically, Villeneuve and crew don't just ensure you'll keep thinking about the events of the film, they ensure that you'll extrapolate from them. You'll advance the story under your own direction, positing to yourself, does Dover live? Does he die? Does he lose the leg? Go to jail? For how long? Does he lose his family as a result, or will they stand by him? This is far more engaging than merely rehashing the story in memory. By this, Prisoners becomes not only a more personal film, one in which we all have an imaginative stake, it also becomes a living narrative, capable of existing outside its established parameters in the minds of a million new storytellers. Certain films, thrillers chief among them, are made and ruined in their final moments. Their stories until then are intentionally unstable and misleading and require a powerful cap to steady all the foundation elements and contain the loose threads. Cap it wrong, you topple the narrative and leave the strands flapping free, or worse, fused to unsatisfactory resolutions. Cap it right, though, and a good movie becomes great just like that. Prisoners was already an incredibly intelligent and narratively labyrinthine film before its final scene, but in the last 30 seconds before the screen goes dark, without the aid of any dialogue or further exposition, it becomes something else entirely. Perfect.